and welcome back to another episode of Motivate with Coach Camp. We are down here in this distinctively delicious and amazing studio known as SRP with Mr. Derek Michaud. Hey, I have got a really special guest for you guys this week. Look, it's not hard to look and find, and I'm using look as a pun, you'll find out in a minute why, where this person fits in our life. Look, I got to be honest with you. There are some areas that there's just expansion happening all the time. And whenever I had the opportunity to bring this individual in to talk about his expertise, where his business is going, who he is, why he's the person he is, and I found out some of the backstory, I'm like, oh, you guys are going to love it. So it's absolutely amazing. I am so thrilled to introduce to you this week's guest, Mr. Doctor Toyos. How are you doing, sir?
Great. Thanks for having me.
Man, thanks for coming down. Look, the weather's a little funky outside.
Yeah.
Yeah, April, what are you going to do? Tomorrow to be 80. Today it's cold and rainy outside. So thanks for making the trip out. So here's the deal. I want people to know who Rolando, am I saying that correctly? I don't want to mess that up. So Rolando Toyos, who he is, the person. And so the best way to do that, of course, is to just start at the foundation. So share with my listeners, if you would, where are you from? Where'd you grow up?
So talking about backstory, so I have a very interesting backstory. My parents escaped Castro's Cuba.
What year was that?
In this 58, 57.
Is that around Bay of the Pigs time, huh?
Bay of Pigs was like 61,
okay,
so before that.
A little before.
So my dad was a professional baseball player. He was signed by the Yankees and was playing minor league baseball for the Yankees. And he was going back and forth from Cuba, met my mom, and they got married. And then the revolution started in Cuba. And as you can see, there's two factions, one that was pro-Castro, and then you had a group that wasn't pro-Castro. Right. So my parents weren't. Luckily, with baseball, you could still get out of the country, and the thought was that you would come back. But my parents, as soon as they escaped from Cuba, they decided not to come back. Settled in New York, and then I have an older brother, and born in New York, and first 10 years were in New York City. And
y'all were down in Manhattan?
Down in Manhattan.
Yeah. Did your dad play for the Yankees?
No. Well, he played minor league for the Yankees. Yeah, so he just wasn't... and I'm just going by what he said. He's just, so many years in Cuba and going back and forth, and it was just so hard to make it. And he was a Cuban shortstop, so Cuban shortstops were what was actually making it into the majors. So there was a lot of competition for that. And he wasn't really a big guy, so he was a great fielding, kind of soft hitting Cuban shortstop. So he got so far and that was it. But it was his ticket out of Cuba to come to the United States.
Well, so many different folks from that area, Cuba, Dominican Republic, a lot of those islands down there, they come over to America to play baseball. Yeah. And they're some of the best players in the entire world.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's what you have to be especially on the Yankees. I'm a Yankees fan.
Oh, are you?
I am diehard. My daughter, her name's Mattingly.
Oh, really? I didn't know
For a reason. Because Don was not acceptable by my wife. So we had to go with Mattingly. But yeah, die hard. I was supposed to play second base for the Yankees. Turns out there was another reason why I didn't, because I wasn't good enough. Yeah. So there's that. But nevertheless, I love the Yankees.
I grew up wanting to be the Yankee shortstop. And so, my mom wanted me to be a doctor. My dad wanted me to be a baseball player. So at least one of the two worked out.
How old were you when you were in New York?
So 60. I was born in 66, so the first 10 years there. So when the Yankees were winning championships,
that's what I was wondering,
with Reggie and all that. Nice. So I was a big Reggie Jackson
77,
fan.
78. God, I'm jealous.
That was great.
Man, I remember seeing Jackson hit the 3 jacks in the one game against the Dodgers. Yeah. God, I'm so good. I was a little kid then, but nevertheless. So here you are. All right, so you're growing up New York City, and at that time you say that your dad wanted you to be a baseball player. Obviously, I can understand why. Love that kind of stuff myself. Yeah. And then your mom wanted you to be a doctor. What were you thinking at the age of 10 to like 16, 17? What were you thinking you were destined for?
No, as a little kid, I didn't, when you're a kid, you don't know any better, but I thought that I would be able to be a pediatrician by day and then the Yankees shortstop
I love it.
by night. So,
I love that, man.
We had encyclopedias, so I'd always be reading the encyclopedia, and as soon as my dad got home, we were playing baseball. So I can't remember a time not playing baseball, not getting hit grounders and not throwing and all that. I really loved baseball, but the problem with being with a minor leaguer is that you get burned out. So by the time I was about 12, 13, I started getting burned out on baseball, and then I started turning to playing basketball and playing football. So played all three sports in high school.
Oh, okay.
Baseball coming the easiest, so I really never had to practice that, and I can always make a team. But I really got into playing basketball, and I enjoyed basketball. It was more fast-moving, more fast-paced, and it really helped me get out of burnout of playing all the time. And I think that's what's going on with baseball now with kids, is that they're getting these repetitive technique and repetitive exercises, and they're getting injuries. So you're seeing a lot more kids getting injuries because they're just playing one sport. And what I really enjoyed was playing one sport, and then that sport would end, then I'd be in something else, and then be in something else. And with these guys with pitching injuries and wrist injuries, back injuries, and all this other stuff, because they're playing just one sport the whole year.
Right.
They're not giving their arms a break. They're not giving their legs a break, and they're not doing different things to work different muscles and different joints. So I think it's going to be kind of a big problem.
There's so much validity to that, because you're right. Depending on what the sport is, there are certain, movements or exercises or demands of the body that are specific to those types of sports. And so whenever you definitely are expanding that, you're getting a, full body workout, so to speak. I didn't know that you played all three. So what did you play in football? What position?
So I was a wide receiver and a free safety.
Okay.
Started out as a quarterback, but really enjoyed being a free. I loved I loved playing defense. Wide receiver, if you're a wide receiver, you get maybe 3 or 4 passes. That's what I didn't like about baseball either. As a shortstop, my dad and I would practice all day long, and then I'd go to the game and
2 or 3 grounders,
and maybe not even get a grounder.
Right, yeah.
So I would have been way better as a pitcher or catcher.
Somebody always involved. Did you have the ADDs?
Yeah,
I do.
I don't have ADD, but I'm definitely high energy, motion. I need to move around. I need to do. So as a wide receiver, you may get 3 or 4 passes, and if you played quarterback, they didn't let you play defense at our school. So I was like, I do want to play defense. So it was a free safety, and then shortstop in baseball, and then a point guard in basketball.
So I know all of this is going to be relevant because it plays into actually what you ended up doing as a doctor, and then some of that connection that you have with athletes. So we're definitely going to hit on that. Yeah. So whenever you got out of high school, what was the next step for you?
College, and then trying to decide whether I was going to play basketball and go to school. So I was a pre-med and trying to play college basketball.
Where at?
At Cal.
Okay.
And what I realized right away, this wasn't high school. And I came from a really small high school. And then once you get into a big university like that, you're competing against, the top of the top academically, and you're competing against the top of the top physically too on Division I basketball. So that was a hard transition my first year of trying to
balance study, academics.
Yeah. So, I just remember going in one of the first months, and I said to the coaches, listen, with the practice schedule, I'm missing this chemistry lab every week. And basically the assistant coach said, pick a new major. So I had to make a decision going forward, and I guess the decision was made for me when I hurt my knee. So I blew out my ACL, and that was a turning point for me, because then it was 1 year of not playing, and they got tired of seeing me just kind of sitting around. They said, why don't you go do something else with your time? And so I started coaching basketball at a local high school as an assistant basketball coach. So I became more of a student, and then I started coaching again as I was going through rehab, and it kind of opened my eyes to working with kids and doing that. So after I did my rehab, I came back and I started playing, and I made a move, and I felt my other knee kind of give the way my right knee was, and I was like, I don't want to do this. So, and at that time, I was so into the academics, and I started doing research, and I started doing all these other things that I said, you know what, it's time to just stop pursuing sports and just
Focus on
concentrate on school.
When you were in medicine, what were you thinking at that time? 'Cause I heard you say pediatrician early.
Yeah, I was, I think if you don't come from a medical family, you probably turn to what you actually see all the time.
Sure.
So the only doctors I was seeing as a kid as a pediatrician. I was like, oh, yeah. So I was,
that makes sense.
But then when I blew out my knee and I had the knee surgery, then I was thinking, oh, orthopedic surgery sounds pretty cool. So I knew I wanted to be in medicine, but before I went to medical school, I got more and more into coaching and more into working with students. So once I graduated from undergrad, I actually went to grad school to this program at Stanford where it's a master's in science education where you take science courses and then you're teaching. And so I got a master's, started teaching, and I taught high school and coached high school basketball before I went to medical school.
Nice. Obviously Coach Camp is the title, but I am a coach, right? Yeah. So I've coached sports 20 plus years. I love that part of it because you feel like that all those years that you spent studying the game, whatever the game is that you love, practicing it, playing it, now you're able to pour that knowledge and experience into the next generation. And then whenever you see those students have those breakthroughs, it's just phenomenal. So I feel like that builds a lot of character in you and probably had something to do with you being able to structure yourself to be a doctor too, I would imagine.
Well, for me, what I saw the missing piece in education was coaches were into having these players play better, but they weren't into the academic part. So I felt what I wanted to do was something different when I was coaching is that, academics is first. So the first thing that I implemented with all the teams that I coach is that, look, if you don't have a B or better in your classes, I'm not going to let you play. And if you have a teacher, if you're acting up in class and any of your teachers ever come to me and say you're acting up in class, I'm going to bench you. And essentially, I kind of flipped the script that I was like, we're not going to be dumb athletes. I want you guys to be the best students, and the athletics come in together. So, one of the things that I always talk about when in that time period is that, we had a championship game coming, and actually a teacher had come up to me and said, hey, these two of your players have been acting up in my class, and I sat them because these are the rules, and you guys have been acting up, you haven't been turning in your homework, you haven't been acting as a role model in education, so you're not going to play in this game. So they learned a valuable lesson, and all these, now with Facebook, all these kids that I coach, they're all friends of mine on Facebook, and they tell me things like, you taught me so many lessons, and I'm glad you were so hard on us, and now they're respectable people. And these schools that I was coaching at were inner city schools. So
it's like Coach Carter. You ever see that movie?
Yeah. but I think we were better than Coach Carter. We won a state championship. So
there you go.
So we were, they should have done a Coach Toyos now. Yeah. So I think they learned valuable lessons, and it was all secondary. So they realized that. That they were there for an education, that I wanted them to be academically viable. Like a lot of the times at the schools that I taught, they had some great athletes, but they could never academically qualify to go to colleges, so they had to wind up going to a junior college or something like that, and then they wound up getting lost in the shuffle or not breaking through just because they didn't combine those two things. So, we had an after-school program. A lot of times during finals, we would come in early, so we would come in at 7, they would study from 7 to 8, then go to school. Then we would, instead of practicing right after school, we would actually do study hall. And then at 5, then we would have our practice from 5 to 7. So they always did well in school, and they always knew that they had to be role models in the classroom. So if they were acting up, they wouldn't be playing. And it's a great position to be in because that's something they really wanted to do. So maybe they really didn't want to do science, but they really wanted to play basketball. I go, well, you're going to have to do well in your science class if you're actually going to play on the team.
Look, you said that you were in an inner city school, so I feel like that this is an important factor, and obviously I didn't know your students in that, but I know what I teach. I teach in the inner city of Memphis and college, and so a lot of those students, they came from backgrounds that didn't have that healthy home environment. They didn't have the structure they needed. They didn't have the accountability, and I feel like that not just as a teacher, but as a coach, you have a certain role that you need to play, the mentorship aspect of things, to where you have accountability in a lot of areas of life. It's not just, just focus on this and don't worry about everything else. It'll take care of itself. That accountability is important, but then you got to draw that line in the sand where you say, this is what is expected and this doesn't move. And that's what I do with my students as well. In fact, I've joked on it on the podcast a handful of times, but I really do this. I tell everybody on day one, I have 2 rules. Don't be late. That's part of the accountability. Be here on time, because my time's important, your time's important. Let's get started on time. The second part is don't suck. How you suck is you're not giving your best, and you don't owe me your best. You owe it to yourself, but I'm going to make you accountable. And what is good for one is going to be good for the next. So there's not going to be like this idea that one person gets away with something and the other person doesn't. And you just showed that whenever you mentioned that you had players going into a very important game that may have been some of your better players, and you bench them. Look, that's the hard thing to do as a coach, because part of your heart's competitive, and the rest of the team, quote, may suffer from the repercussions of that. But the lesson that is being instilled in that moment is invaluable. You cannot put a price tag on instilling in someone personal accountability, self-discipline, and the ability to live up to what is expected of them in a situation. And of course, obviously, being a sport. I think all of these tools play into probably the person you ended up becoming as a doctor down the road, because as a coach, I feel like you are instilling life lessons. It's not just about the sport itself, and you had all that growing up from your father, and then as you played sports as well. So when you're finding yourself getting down the road a little ways in your med stuff, when was it that you decide, I'm focusing in on eyes, and use the word focus, and maybe that's a pun, I don't know, but that's what you focused on?
Well, I had a research mentor in undergrad that was a little disappointed that I didn't keep doing research and I didn't go for a PhD and all this. And what I realized when I was teaching high school and coaching is that there was a big something missing. And like I told the kids, look, I love doing what I do. I love working with you guys. I love educating and I love teaching. But just like I'm telling you to pursue your dreams, I need to pursue mine. So I actually gave up a team, and I thought about staying one more year. I actually gave up a team that was going to be really good that we developed over a course of 3 or 4 years. But I said, you know what, I really want to do this. I'm going to apply to medical school and become a doctor and do research and do the things that I feel like I'm missing out on. And so I really enjoyed the teaching. I really enjoyed the coaching. I don't regret any minute of that. But I'm glad I made the decision that I did to go ahead and pursue that.
Yeah. And so when you make this decision, where was it you went to? What school?
So I went to University of Illinois for medical school. So that was another. I think when you're younger, you make decisions based on the wrong things. And the good thing about having that I was a little bit more mature, that I was basing the decision like, what is the best place for me?
If you don't mind me asking, how old were you at that time when you went to Illinois?
23, 22, something like that. I graduated a little early from high school and graduated early from college. And so there was a list of schools that I got into, and I go through this with my kids, telling them, don't look at the list and then think, okay, I want to go there. That's where everybody thinks I should go because that's the best school or something like that. I always tell them, what's the best school for you? What do you want to get out of this? And so I didn't even, Chicago and going to University of Illinois for medical school wasn't even, it was on my list of places, but I wasn't really thinking of it that high. And my roommate in grad school, he was a pre-med. He wound up going there, and he said, you should apply to this school. So I was thinking staying in California, staying with my friends and all that other
Probably
stuff.
better weather, I'm guessing.
Better weather. I was, So the school that I was trying to decide whether go either UCLA or go to Illinois, but I went to Illinois, I visited, and I saw the program, and I saw what it could offer me, and that I could do research and do these other things. And I was like, this is the best school for me. And I really enjoyed my time getting away from California and the California schools, and going to Chicago, hooking back up with my roommate in grad school, and having an upperclassman to ask questions of, and what'd you do in this class, and what's the best way to attack this class. And so it was a great experience, but getting out of my comfort zone of getting away from my friends and getting away from everything that was familiar to me, to going to a completely different place and meeting completely different people.
I say this all the time. In fact, the episode that comes out just before yours is coming out, so like the next Monday. So yours is 1 week behind the one that's about to come out. I hit all over leaving the comfort zone. It's the only time you really grow is whenever you're doing something you're really not comfortable with, or you feel like there's a high level of failure, so you're going to be more intense, more focused, and pushing yourself outside of that is going to be the moments where you really find yourself. Because when you stay comfortable, you just become stagnant, and it's so easy to do that. I mean, honestly, that's our nature, right? So when you go up to Illinois, I was going to ask you this. I have it written down. You kind of touched on it a little bit. I was going to ask you about when you got into med school, did you have some mentors there that helped guide you in the direction that you ended up going? Or was it just something that was organic and it just kind of took place for you?
No, I don't think you do anything. You should always look for mentors.
Yeah.
And not necessarily that they're going to be holding your hand or give you a lot of time or whatever, but you should look to people where you look and go, that's where I want to go. So if you want to go from A to B, who's at B, and who do you see at B that you have respect for? And just ask them questions like, how'd you get there? So basically how I got my mentor is very weird. I'm walking on campus.
We're all about weird. You're on Coach Camp show, man.
Yeah, well,
it's going to fit in fine. It's going to be normal here, which is weird.
So I'm walking through campus, and Chicago is a lot colder than California, and it's freezing, and I don't have a jacket. The best I've got is like a windbreaker, and I'm walking through campus, and so I hear the dean of the medical school, hey, Toyos, get over here. So I come over to his office. He goes, you don't have a jacket? And I go, man, you brought me here from California.
I got a surfboard. You need that? So we can use that somewhere.
All I got's a windbreaker. And he goes in his closet and he gives me his jacket. So he gives me his jacket, and so we start talking a little bit. And he goes, I see that you're involved, and that's one of the reasons why he brought you here. And are you going to run for any office? And I go, I really hadn't thought about it. I just got here. I just kind of want to concentrate on school. And he goes, you would be a good class president. So why don't you run for class president? So we're sitting there and talking, and I'm talking to him more and more, and I'm like getting into his history, and I'm like, this is somebody I can look up to.
Did he have a sports background?
None. No sports. No sports at all. It was all science, but he was hardcore. He was hardcore science, PhD from Harvard, and dean of students, and essentially, if you get to be class president, you're going to be spending a lot of time on boards, and I would be spending a lot of time with him and talking to him. So
he knew you needed jackets, so he's going to have to hang out with me more.
So from that conversation, I ran for class president and won. And from that, there would be these meetings every week that you would have with the board and with faculty, and you would kind of give them what was going on in the class and if there's anything that they had to look at or anything that could be improved. And then from that, you got to do other things. And one of the major things that I did was sit on the admissions committee. So as class president, you get to be on the admissions committee and help them decide who gets in the medical school and who doesn't. So I saw medical school from a whole different other side, that if I wouldn't have become class president, I wouldn't have done that. So from that, I realized, shoot, I didn't know this is how you guys pick students, and it's totally different than
saw behind the curtain.
Saw behind the curtain.
Absolutely.
Is totally different than what students think. And I go, I would have done this completely differently now that I see how how applications get processed and how you decide on medical students. So from that, I wrote a book called Insider's Guide to Medical School Admissions, written for students so that they could read this book and realize these are the things to do before you apply. This is how to apply, and this is how to pick schools, and this is what you're going to be going through. And from that book, became really popular, became one of the best-selling books on college campuses. So I started getting invited to college campuses to give speeches to pre-med societies on how to get into medical school, how to succeed in medical school, what they should be doing as an undergrad. So I wound up going and traveling all the U.S.
Wow.
Talking about
what was the span of time on that? Was it like started doing this for like several years, or?
Yeah, it was all 4 years.
All 4 years
of medical school. I wound up doing that. It became a really popular book, and I had a different aspect too because I was a teacher, so I could talk about the teaching aspect of it, and also talk about the admissions aspect of it.
Doc, I want to unpack some stuff.
Yeah.
You gave me so much then. Yeah. It's like now I've got to go back and write a book about what you just said. You unpacked a lot of things here, so it's pretty good. I want to hit some highlights. I don't want to walk past it. Okay. So you mentioned how the guy didn't have any kind of sports background that called you over innocently enough to give you a jacket. Now, here's what this guy does. When he does this, he meets you, and immediately from whatever that connection is, there's chemistry. And sometimes when you see a person, talk to a person, you see where their headspace is. You can see things in them that they cannot see in themselves. That's what a coach does. That's why immediately I was intrigued, thinking maybe this guy has a background in sports, but he doesn't. Yeah. But nevertheless, the fact is, people often, especially as you elevate yourself in life, and by elevation, I mean you experience things, you grow the person that you are, you have a different perspective on life, you start to be able to see stuff that you wouldn't have seen when you were younger. This guy saw that in you in that moment and encouraged you to go down a path you would have never thought of otherwise. This is, my friends, what I love about this show is we're about to do some stuff that you guys right now connecting with us in this moment. You're going to be able to think back on your life or someone else's and say, dang, that did lead to this and that did lead to that. And this is called connecting the dots. So this guy gives you the idea to go for president. You would have not thought about that. You're like, okay, I will.
It wasn't in my thought. Yeah.
It wasn't even there. And then that takes you to a place where now you can visualize and you can see the discrepancies of how you saw stuff about medical school, and you didn't just sit on that, you took action. And by taking action, that meant that you were going to share that moment. Sharing the moment. That's what this is about. You see the connection going on here in my head? It's ping-ponging. But I'm like, holy crap, Doc, this is everything that I felt like that I was hitting on in all of my episodes, and you're pulling this together through your own personal life story. So then whenever you start sharing that moment, that leads to your next thing, which is now you got this book and now you're doing these speeches and all these people appreciate, and who knows how many lives you have impacted because that guy offered you a jacket. What is up?
Yeah.
Isn't that awesome?
Yeah.
Have you thought about it in full spectrum that way?
What I think about is you have to take advantage of opportunities when they come in front of you. And I think sometimes we miss an opportunity because we're not looking. And I wasn't necessarily looking for an opportunity, but here I get this interaction with the dean of students, which I only had one interaction during the interview process. And when he was trying to recruit me to come to this school, and it could have been just that. You know, I could have never had any more interactions with him. He's got a bunch of students, he's got a bunch of things to do, but we have this interaction, and you know, he's giving me this opportunity, and
you took it.
Yeah, I have to take it. Whereas a lot of what I find sometimes is you give these opportunities and you open these doors for people, and they don't realize that you're opening a door, and they basically they get distracted and move somewhere else.
Or they don't think they're capable, or they're not the right person.
That's right.
They talk themselves out of moments that could have been life transforming, not just for themselves, but for so many other people. And just a small snippet, because it's not about me, this is about you, Doc. But the small snippet is, I wouldn't be sitting here today talking to you about this moment, sharing it with millions of viewers, and I'm saying millions, if it hadn't been for my students, because they were the ones in a reversal that saw the possibilities of me being a motivational speaker, being somebody that was a public advocate for others. They're like, dude, you just got the it. You need to go do it. If I wouldn't have trusted that They saw that in me. And it's so profound because as a coach, I constantly spent, and I still do because I still coach, my time looking at the players and thinking about where they are, but where they could go and how to pull that out of them and how to get them to believe that in themselves. And here it was a full reversal, and my students are doing that for me. And then you, sir, were sharing that with others and still are, I imagine, and infusing that into society to this day. And who knows how big your ripple is at this point.
Well, actually, I got a good story on that, too. When I was coaching, so I was given my first coaching experience was I was given a freshman team. And they usually didn't have a freshman team at the high school. So basically, if you got cut from the junior varsity team, you didn't get to play.
Just it, yeah.
And so my initial job was that I was just going to be an assistant coach on the junior varsity team and an assistant coach on the varsity team. And they were going through tryouts, and there was a kid there, and he was gangly. You know, he just didn't have the coordination yet. He just grew too fast for his body.
I've seen him.
You've seen them, right?
Yeah.
You've seen these where the body just hasn't caught up to everything yet. So he's just kind of, flopping around there.
Yeah.
And so we're sitting around and we're discussing cuts. And they're going through this list, and they go, and I see that this kid's being cut. And I look at the coach and I said, you're cutting you're potentially the best player that you're going to have out of all of these players. So these guys look at me and they go, wait, are we talking about the same guy, Travis? And I go, yes, Travis.
Yeah.
He's got all the skills are there. They just need to be put together, and a coach needs to believe in him and teach him. And they're like, well, we just can't see keeping him on the team. And I go, well, look, you don't have a freshman team. Why don't we get a freshman team together and I'll coach it? And the varsity guy goes, that's a good idea. I've been wanting to do that, and we have some games that we can schedule with some other schools that have a freshman team. So if you want to take these kids who were going to get cut and form a team, I'll let you do it, and I'll give you gym time and all this other stuff. So okay, great. So I take this team and I take Travis, and by the end of the year, Travis is just awesome. Better than any guy that the junior varsity guy has. That's fun. Right? And so anyway, I wind up getting another job. So I get the head coaching job at another school. So I leave these guys, get a head coaching job at another high school where I'm teaching at. And we're playing a game. And there I see Travis. He's on the bench over there. And I'm like, I still in my mind thinking,
they're missing out.
Travis is the best player, right?
Yeah.
So we're killing them. We're killing them by like 16 points. And the next thing I know, coach turns over and Travis, get in there. Travis brings them back.
Of course.
Beats
You're like,
us.
I taught you that, dog. Why'd you sit down?
I know, exactly. Travis comes in, beats us. And then, from then on, he winds up being a star from them. He gets a Division I college scholarship, this guy that was going to be cut. And, at the end of the game, I go,
you still got to feel good, man.
I go, first of all, I said, Travis, why'd you do that to me?
Right.
And then second, I said, Coach, I've told you this for years. This guy is your best player. And he winds up being one of the top players that they ever had at that.
It is such a good feeling as a coach. And when you can do that for a player, even if it's going against you like it was in that moment, you still have pride knowing that you were able to bring something out of a player that wasn't there or influence that player to do something.
Look, all those players that played on that freshman team wound up making the team.
And that's something.
They all, and a lot of them are the good friends that, will hit me up on Facebook and say, hey, Coach Toyos, how's it going?
Just a quick piggyback on that, because I had a similar circumstance, not as profound and great as that, but just in a game, it happened in a moment. There was a kid that he was in a funk. He had struck out several times. He was their better player on the other team, and I could see in his swing, he kept dipping his shoulder. He was swinging underneath the ball. And so in between innings, I walked over to him and I said, hey, man, stay through the ball. Keep your backside up. Yeah. Just swing level, because you're strong enough, you're going to drive the ball. I swear to you, Doc, the next at bat, he hit it over the fence. I threw my glove down up and say, dude, not in this game. Next game, not this game. So look, here's where we are. It's time for a break. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to dive into Dr. Toyos, what brought him into vision and what was the vision he has for the future. So don't go away. We'll be right back.
A great opportunity awaits. The Motivate with Coach Camp podcast is now in its second season, and we are excited to say that we have listeners all over the United States and in 19 countries. If you have a company and you're interested in some very affordable advertising, while at the same time supporting a great cause, please go to motivatewithcoachcamp.com and fill out that sponsorship page, and we'll get right back to you. You can support the podcast through donations on Venmo at Motivate with Coach Camp. Thank you to all the listeners and guests who have blessed this podcast with their engagement and involvement.
All right, everybody, welcome back from the break. I have been here with Dr. Rolando Toyos of Toyos Clinic. He is a world-renowned eye doctor. And look, Doc, when I started looking into some of your accolades, because I was going to do a list of them to just kind of give people an idea of who you are, where you're from, as far as the once you became an eye doctor, there's too many. I'm like, we have to have a whole episode of me just listing things of all the things you have your hands in. And so like you're deep into the eye world, obviously. So just for my listeners, share a few of those accolades that you've achieved that you are proud of. And you should be proud of achievements because that's why we work hard, right? So what are some of the things that you would talk about? Because I may miss one of those if I tried to list them.
Yeah, I think in any profession, you got to do what you like.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to be spending a lot of time doing it. And luckily, in teaching and coaching, I had something I loved. And I was looking for something in the medical world that I loved. And before I get into all the stuff that I did, just how I got there. So I got into medical school, and the school that I was at was heavily into trauma. So it was University of Illinois, had Cook County Hospital. If you remember that show ER.
I do.
Okay.
Big fan.
All the episodes were taken off of real life stuff that would happen.
That explains why they were pretty good early on.
Yeah.
Down the road near the end, they kind of got a little Hollywoodish, but most of it was real.
Well, you remember the story where the gang members, they shoot somebody and then they're working on them in the ER, and then the gang members
come
realize,
in and
try to shoot them again.
Yes.
That was, I was
you
there.
Lived it.
I was there for that.
Oh my God.
And from that point on, then we'd have to have like police officers always at the front. But anyway, so I went there to do trauma. So I got with the trauma department, and I was doing trauma research, and my trauma research was actually operating on rats and doing what's called hypovolemic shock. So basically I would shock them, because what we were trying to figure out is why when somebody loses a lot of blood and you save them, that they look stable, and then later on they crash and they die. And it turned out it was due to sepsis and a bacterial infection. So basically we were causing that in animals and just seeing how they reacted to hypovolemia, and then measuring and doing that. So I was operating on these mice. So it was microsurgery. So I was under a microscope doing these little procedures on mice. So then throughout medical school, I was involved with the trauma team, and I was going through my trauma rotation. And during that trauma rotation, I realized, you know what? I don't like this as much as I thought I would like it. I like the surgery, I like this, that, but it wasn't stimulating me the way that
That's interesting, because usually trauma is like high-end adrenaline.
It is high adrenaline, but in terms of the thinking part, again, I don't want to... It just wasn't for me.
I got you. No, that's fine.
I like the adrenaline part, but the other stuff I didn't. And basically the last straw for me was, we spent hours patching up this kid that was involved in a gang shooting. He was in the hospital for like 3 months, and we finally got him back to normal. Leaves the hospital, and 2 days later he gets shot again, brought through our ER, and he passes away. And for me, that was kind of the last straw. I really wanted to do something that was what I thought would help society a little bit more than that. So I was kind of in a crossroads where, oh shoot, this thing that I was working towards is not something that I want to do. So I went to my research mentor and I said, I don't think I want to do trauma. And my research mentor goes, we've had a lot of residents and people come through here, and they can't operate under the microscope like you can operate. Maybe you should think about ophthalmology, which is something I was like,
again,
that was furthest from my thought process.
How many years had you done trauma at that point?
So 3 years.
Okay.
I'd invested 3 years, and it looked like I would apply for a residency in trauma, and I'd probably get the greatest residency because I had all this research and I had all this stuff. And so I go to watch eye surgery, and it just all clicked. I was like, oh my God, this is so cool. You guys are using a microscope, and this is all microsurgery, and you're putting this thing back together, and you're doing this surgery. And the guy that I was following that day, he was a real cool guy. And I was like, yeah, and I could see myself being like this guy. And I said, yeah, this is it. The light bulb went off, and it went from being depressed that I'd spent 3 years doing something I wasn't sure I really wanted to do, to finding something that I really wanted to do. So I wound up getting residency trained in ophthalmology, and I wound up reading Ben Carson's Gifted Hands, and one of the things that he talked about was the reason why he went to Australia to start out his professional career, and it was because they didn't have anybody there that was doing all the surgeries that he had learned while he was at Hopkins. So he's like, I'm going to find an opportunity where I could do a lot of surgery. So I was finishing up my residency.
What year was that?
Let's see, 98, 97,
LASIK
98.
and stuff, was that kind of forefront? That's where we're getting at.
Yeah, this is where we're getting at.
I'm jumping in front of the, look, sometimes guys, the horse is up here, and I'm just like, I'm going to put the cart up here. We're backing it up. Keep going.
And I'm Hispanic, so stories are long. They start.
No, I like, and then my anxiousness, I got the ADD, I'm like, well, where is that at? So it's like, I jump in too early. Sorry about that.
You asked the question, I'm going on this whole arc, but I got a call. I'm finishing up my residency, and I get a call from a headhunter, and it's actually a headhunter from St. Jude's, and they're like, hey, would you consider Tennessee? So I'm like, I'm a New York guy that moved to California, that trained in Chicago, right? So I'm like, Tennessee, I've never been through there, never heard anything. I don't know anybody in Tennessee. So he's telling me the story. This is, now 26 years ago, telling me the story about St. Jude's, and I'm like, oh wow, that's a very powerful story. So I fly to Memphis and meet the people there, and they needed a eye surgeon to kind of look at some of these kids that would get eye cancers, and they couldn't find an ophthalmologist that felt comfortable with kids to look at these kids. And I would, at Northwestern, where I was doing my residency, we had children's hospitals, so you spend a lot of time at children's hospitals seeing these kids, and I felt very comfortable seeing kids. And they said, would you consider being the doctor that looks at these kids for St. Jude's? And I said, yeah, I'll do that. And so I wound up starting my own clinic straight out of residency, moving here to Tennessee, and I love eye surgery. I love everything about it. Like it's intellectually stimulating, and I love doing the research. And so once you find your passion, then all the rest follows.
The purpose comes along.
Yeah, purpose and hours, because if you're not passionate about something, you're not going to devote the hours. So I tell
100%.
people, as a coach, I devoted a ton of hours. As a teacher, I devoted a ton of hours. And as a doctor, I devoted a ton of hours. And the number one reason being is that I love what I do.
Yep.
So once you find the thing that you love to do, it's not work. It doesn't seem like work. And, you don't need all the other stuff. Like a lot of people need a lot of money to be motivated, or they need something like a big house to be motivated, or whatever material thing they need to be motivated for their job. Whereas if they found what they were passionate about, all that stuff doesn't matter.
Bingo.
You're passionate about what you're doing, and you can devote a lot of hours.
Doc, have you been hanging out in the hallway when I talk?
That's right. Well,
I feel like you may have been, because I have this thing I say: if your paycheck is what is pursuant of your passion, then you will lose your purpose. But when you chase your purpose, followed with your passion, the paycheck will follow.
Yeah.
In the end, it comes down to the byproduct needs to be the money. The byproduct cannot be your passion. When you pursue something you love and are adamant about, whatever that is, you will become great at it.
You will become great.
Inevitably, you will become great at it. So this obviously was your passion.
Yeah, and Malcolm Gladwell, I think, hit the nail on the head. Is that you need really 10,000 hours to be an expert.
I remember reading that.
In any of that. And so, how are you going to be able to devote 10,000 hours to something? You better love it.
You better love it.
So the greatness comes from that. So first you find the passion. Then you put your 10,000 hours, and then those 10,000 hours will result in you being great at whatever you're doing. And then all the rest of the stuff follows. Any kind of recognition that you get for what you're doing and whatever comes from being great and passionate about the profession that you choose. So like I said, to you in this podcast that I devote the same amount of hours of being a doctor as I was a teacher. People don't get that. If you love being a teacher, you're probably waking up at 6 and going to bed at 8 or 9, still doing this thing.
Yep.
Same thing with coaching. People talk about these college coaches that are spending 20 hours because they love it. They love doing. They're competitive.
It's what drives them.
Yeah, and I'm competitive too about what I do as an eye surgeon. I want to be the best at it, and the only way that I could be the best at it is constantly reading, constantly researching, constantly finding the right answers to questions. Never getting lazy. I constantly tell myself let's push. Don't get comfortable. And you could get easily comfortable in being a surgeon because you can go, okay, I've learned how to do this surgery and I'm going to continue and I'm good at doing this. I'm not going to learn the newest surgery because I don't want to be uncomfortable.
Right.
And there's always newer things coming out as our technology gets better and better. In eye surgery, there's always new things coming out. And if you're saying, I'm just going to be comfortable here and stay here, you're going to be left behind. So one of the reasons why I moved to Tennessee was there was nobody at the time in West Tennessee doing LASIK. And there was nobody doing cataract surgery the way that I was taught cataract surgery, which was small incision, no stitch, cataract surgery. So when I came down here, I was thinking to myself, look, there's nobody providing these services. I can provide these services and be busy right away. So whereas my other friends in residency, they chose kind of big cities, and some of them stayed in Chicago, and I could have stayed in Chicago. When we would get back together and kind of compare the things that we're doing, I would tell them, look, I'm doing hundreds of cataract surgery. I'm doing hundreds.
So you were actually pulling people into your career field from your performance.
Yeah, after about 2 or 3 years, I had lapped them, 10 times because they weren't getting the experience because they were not in private practice, not in a place that they were offering anything unique, and they were just another number in a big group of doctors. So it was a great move for me. I said I signed a contract for 3 years to stay here in West Tennessee, and I've never left.
That was 1998 is what I had written down. See, look, I did some research.
25 years.
I never did my homework when I was in school, so I've got a lot of stuff to make up for. But when you came here, you mentioned that it was about St. Jude.
Yeah.
So how did that tie in? How much work did you do for St. Jude, or do you still do stuff for them?
Yeah, I did that for 10 to 12 years, but then after that, St. Jude grew and grew and grew, and then they could get their own devoted, dedicated doctor. So it was one of those things where if they needed me, they called me. And then I wound up doing a neonatal, staffing a neonatal intensive care unit in Jackson, Tennessee. So I was seeing all these premature babies. And back then in 98, these premature babies, they were given oxygen, and it turned out that oxygen had a negative effect on their retina and caused retinopathy of prematurity. So every premature baby would get an eye exam back in the day. So I did that for 10, 12 years as well. So I did a lot of pediatrics when I first moved here to West Tennessee.
Do you find that interesting correlation? Because I wrote this down. whenever you mentioned about St. Jude being a draw for you to come to here, and then whenever you got into the ophthalmology career field, that you started out thinking you would be a pediatrician, and here you are full circle.
I know. seeing a bunch of kids. It all kind of naturally fit. That, I still love seeing kids, love doing that. And when I first moved here too, I got the ability to coach. So I wound up coaching some kids in church league and
basketball
and basketball and that. So it was actually a great move for me to come here to Tennessee and Mississippi, as well as we're in South Haven. So it was great to come into this area for me, and I haven't left.
You haven't left, but Toyos is worldwide. Yeah. So how many different affiliations and or clinics do you have nationwide and international?
So this goes into, you never know where you're going to discover the next thing. So I had a bunch of patients that had a disease called dry eye, and I had this new piece of technology called intense pulse light that I was using for patients with rosacea. And it turned out that this technology, intense pulse light, was helping patients for dry eye. So that started me on a whole research arc on if light could be used to treat patients with dry eye. So I made that discovery of intense pulse light and low-level light treatment as a treatment for dry eye. And it took about 20 years of, pounding the pavement and educating and getting it
years
before the medical community said, oh my gosh, there's something here in terms of light treatment for dry eye. So in 2022, we got FDA approval for this treatment that I had come up with and for this technology that I worked on and that I have patents for. So that put me on a whole different arc where now I was going around the world training doctors on how to treat dry eye. And from that, I got asked by different countries, hey, could you help us set up dry eye clinics here in our country? So I've gotten involved in a bunch of different groups in Europe and Australia, here in the United States, setting up dry eye clinics and using the technology and teaching them what I've learned in terms of treating dry eye with light.
I got to be honest with you. When you just said those things, I had 5 squirrels running different directions in my head because immediately I had so many questions that came to my mind. The first question is this. So for 20 years, tell it best you can, because I don't even know how I could describe this. For 20-year process of trial and error, research, etc., how do you stay motivated toward that? And at some point, you had to think to yourself, maybe this isn't a real thing. Maybe this isn't going to work. But you kept plugging. Talk about that a little bit, because that's a mindset that most people cannot wrap their head around, is pursuing something so intensely for so long to see it through. Yeah. That is easy to have given up on, I would imagine.
Yeah. So my initial research mentor, Professor Byrne at Cal at Berkeley, where I went to undergrad, he really wanted me to stay in research. And I would ask him the question, you have tons of students and people visit you all over the place.
Again, somebody's seeing something in you didn't see.
Yeah. I was like, why, what is it in me that you call me, every periodically and say, I want you back in research. I want you back in research. And he says, because you're a hard-headed son of a gun, right?
Yeah.
So he said,
you got to have that though.
He says, you're hard-headed. When you get an idea in your head, and you think it's right, you pursue it to the end, whereas a lot of people will give up. So he said that, years ago when I was young, and I think that's it. It's like I was seeing this thing work, and now I just had to do the science and the research to back it up and then convince other doctors to do it. So I talk about this in one of my books, is that medicine is the slowest moving out of all the professions. So in tech, if a better tech comes around, in 3 months, it's adopted and you go further. So just let's think about it. You had MySpace, and then MySpace went away, and you had AOL.com, and that went away. And then Facebook comes, and then all of a sudden it blows up. Hey, this is better. We're going to adopt that. And then Instagram comes, and then it blows up. Snapchat, TikTok, in other professions, new technology comes and it's adopted right away. This has actually been studied. It takes 17 years for a treatment to work, for it to become standard of care.
I guess that has to do with like field study and that. It takes a while to document and prove.
But it's also mentality.
Okay.
So, you know, in the tech world, they're ready for something new. In industry, they're ready for something new. In medicine, say you've been studying and doing something one way.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it. It's the way they see it, right?
Yeah, they don't want to change. You know, we're a very static profession, so we don't want to change, especially if we've mastered something, to say, okay, we're going to give this thing up that we've mastered and go in a new direction. So it takes a while. So this was working. We had the new adopters. So you have your first adopters of technology, and that's the first part of the bell-shaped curve. And then what happens is more and more, and then there's an exponential explosion of it. And then it settles down where it becomes standard of care. So, and that's what happened with this. So I talk about, I just went to South Korea to give a dry eye lecture. And I was there in 2016, and we had 12 doctors that showed up to the lecture. I was just there a month and a half ago, and we had 150 doctors
Things
that
are growing.
showed up. See, so it's exponential. So it went a slow ripple, and then boom, it just happens.
It goes viral.
It goes viral.
Essentially, yeah.
But it takes 17 years in the medical.
Best practice is always behind. You know, I teach EMS. It's the same thing, not as drastic, but it's usually at least a 5-year turnaround on any kind of, whether it's a medicine that has been approved to be used in the field or a procedure, whatever it is. I mean, CPR's changed 40 times? I don't even know. It's been a lot. Now they do upright CPR, so it's like a 30-degree angle, and it's constantly evolving, which medicine has to, because that's what they say. It is not the standard of medicine so much as it is the practice of medicine. Medicine's constantly evolving. Techniques are constantly evolving. So to get ahead of the next generation, you constantly got to be thinking visionary style. So I got a question about that, because this is typical and I like it. A good way to leave a stamp in any kind of career field, though, is to do something innovative outside the box. Do they have it named after you? The dry eye technique?
Yeah, it's Toyos protocol.
Love it.
Yeah. So
I love that, man. Yeah. That's awesome. So when this starts to take off and you start having to do, trips to kind of explain it and or spread the word of it, did you hearken on your college years as president when you were going around and giving presentations about the process of getting into med school? Yeah. I mean, how much did that play into down the road?
Well, and I tell my kids this all the time, is that everything that you do builds to something else. So they make fun of me because I say, do this job, because I tell them, look, I worked fast food. I worked at Wendy's, flipping burgers and fries. And I said, you should do a job like that. And they're like, oh, I don't want to do a job like that. I want to do something. I go, I learned a lot from that. And every job that I had, whether it was, moving or pulling weeds or working at Wendy's, or I made burritos. I worked at a movie theater. Everything builds on itself, and you learn. And being a teacher, what I learned is how to convey what I'm trying to teach in a way that they'll remember it and they can relate to it. And one of the things that I learned at Stanford was the bookshelf way of learning. So basically, we all have things that are kind of the bookshelf, which are standard things that we know. Mm-hmm. And what you want to do is, if you're teaching something new, you don't want it to be so outside of where that bookshelf is that they have nowhere to put that new information.
That's a good point.
So what you want to do is take that new information and put it on the bookshelf that they already have. Right. So, what I learned in teaching was to be able to teach you about something like these wavelengths of light to treat dry eye and how that fits. And just think about it. If I came to you and said, how we're going to treat your dry eye is we're going to use light, and you'd be like, well, what does that have to do with anything? And then you explain it that these wavelengths of light actually stimulate the cells to work better. So you can think about it as when you go out in the sun and we're in this dark room right now, right? Mm-hmm. But if you got out into the sun and it was a nice sunny day, everything would kind of perk up,
Right.
right? Your cells would perk up, you would perk up.
You're right.
Right? It's the same thing. So we have these cells that aren't working so well. Then we hit it with these wavelengths of light, and then all of a sudden these cells perk up and they're working better. Right? So this is kind of the way that you're taught to teach people, and I wouldn't have known how to convey these highly scientific things in a way that people could understand so that they can understand it quickly and go, oh, yeah, I get it.
I think I can share something that may have been happening and maybe you didn't even connect this dot. I don't know. But so that's why my students called me coach from the beginning, was because when I went into a classroom, I didn't teach in the conventional way that a teacher would stand up there like a Ben Stein, animated anyways, as you may already have figured out. But I wanted to find a way to connect with each student, because that's the only way you're going to get the best out of them, is to know what their skills are, what their strengths and weaknesses are, which is exactly what you do as a coach. So as a coach, you evaluate each player independently and you realize where you can put them on a field or on a court. And then you're going to also start to figure out how they learn better, because every person may have a different style of learning. And so you've got to kind of adjust that to the audience or to the individual. And so for you, I do feel like going back to sports being the foundation of so much of your growth as a child, and then into college, and then being a coach. So, the athletics of being a player, then a coach, then now a teacher, and then an innovator. All of those things are correlated. And I think that's actually what starts to build not just the passion for something, which is what you have to have that intensity for such a long period of time, but then having all of those pieces come together. And that's actually where you start to develop that legacy of greatness, that not only are you passing on to the next generation, but you're inspiring the next generation to do that for the one following them. And that, my friend, is the biggest goal of all, is to hit where other people are inspired to do what you've done, try to do it better, and then try to pass it on. And so that's so key. When you hit on all those things, I'm just like, yep, that's awesome. That's awesome. And that, yeah, I feel that, and I'm over here thinking about this stuff. So Dr. Toyos, everything you're saying makes so much sense. And people that are hearing this, they've watched a good number of my episodes. It resonates. It's from one episode to the next. People that are like yourself, that have a passion they pursued, and how they use their life experiences to build the person that they are now, man. It's truly amazing, and it's fun to listen to. And I'm blessed to be on this side of the table to be able to hear those kinds of stories. And, you mentioned passion, and you do it, and it's second nature. Just so y'all know this man, I don't even know where all you've been in the last week, but I know he's traveling constantly. You're all the time going to another city, whether it's New York, whatever, and you're doing classes or you're doing procedures, and you're sharing your time wide scope. And you have a family, you have a wife, you have kids. And so you're trying to balance all those things. So for you to find time to come down to the studio to share your story, your background, what brought you to where you are today with my listeners, it's not lost on me. Time is the only valuable asset we have we can never get back. And when you share that, you should do it in a meaningful way. And this means a lot to me and my listeners. I know that. So as we get close to the finish line here, I do want to ask a couple quick things. So can you put it in a microcosm as to what all procedures Dr. Toyos does with your clinic? Because I would sound foolish if I started trying to list all the things that your clinic does.
So I tell people, Toyos Clinic, our tagline is see better, look better. My wife is oculoplastic, so she does a lot of the aesthetic side, stuff that I used to do, and that's how I discovered intense pulse light. And then the see better part is we do everything medical and surgical with the eye except retina surgery. So my specialties are cataract surgery and LASIK. And now LASIK has turned into small incision LASIK, which we call SMILE. So just like any other surgery, as the incision gets smaller, recovery time is a lot quicker. So back in the day, if you had LASIK, you couldn't go swimming for a month. You might not be able to play basketball for days. But now with small incision LASIK called SMILE, the very next day you can go swimming. You can you wear makeup. You could go boxing. I did SMILE.
Go boxing.
Yeah,
that's intense.
Yeah. Well, I got a boxing story for you if you ever want it.
I do want it. I do. It's amazing.
But we had a soccer player did SMILE, and the next night he was playing in a professional soccer game.
Oh, wow.
So it shows you that. But on the boxing side, so, I used to be the team doctor for a lot of different teams like the Memphis Grizzlies.
I know I have that as here's my last topics. Yeah. Yes. So talk about that.
And then, I worked with Major League Baseball. I worked with boxing, with the NFL. And one of the stories was we had this boxer, Margarito, who had a cataract surgery, small incision cataract surgery after a boxing match because he got hit so hard that he had a retinal detachment and got a cataract. So anyway, they did the repair and they did it with a small incision. So his next fight was going to be in New York City, and New York City had this old rule in their boxing commission stating that anybody that's had cataract surgery could not box in their state. So there's an HBO fight, Cotto versus Margarito. So they were going to cancel this fight. They had already done this build-up, and it was, they had already spent millions and millions of dollars for this fight to happen. And because of this old commission, the law that they had was based on cataract surgery in the old days where it was a large incision with a lot of stitches, whereas Margarito had small incision, no stitches. So I had to appear in front of the New York Boxing Commission with a whole bunch of science and everything showing them that he could box safely because he had small incision surgery, that it wouldn't injure his eye. So I had to show them monkey studies and all this other stuff.
Back to the research.
So then at the end, the commission said, okay, we have to change our rules in terms of boxing. If you've had small incision cataract surgery, you're allowed to box. So Margarito went on to fight. He had a terrible fight. Cotto pummeled him. So for 10 rounds, I had to see Cotto just punching.
And you're
his
thinking,
eye
please,
over.
stick together.
Yeah, exactly.
This is going to be bad.
So it was like science coming to reality, and his eye was fine. So
then it proved your point.
It proved my point.
That's good.
So he got beat up. His eye was fine. There was no problem.
His head's another story.
His head's another story. Well, the funny thing is that he's known as a front forward fighter. That, he'll just keep coming at you. You can hit him in the face, but he'll keep coming at you and coming at you. And it was Manny Pacquiao that actually caused the cataract and the retinal detachment on him. But I got a whole bunch of sports stories, which I put in a book called The Life and Times of a Sports Ophthalmologist.
How'd you land the two questions about the Grizzlies? I actually wrote this down. How did you land the Grizzlies gig for a while? And did you have to get special equipment because none of those guys are short?
No special equipment.
Okay.
Their owner was looking for an ophthalmologist, and he had ties to Stanford, and he saw that I went to Stanford, so we just started talking, and he said, do you want to take care of the team? And I said, yeah, I'll take care of the team. So it was, interesting times. I took care of the Grizzlies for 10 years. We wound up doing LASIK on players and coaches, and but you have to go to the game. Back then, you'd have to go to the game 1 hour before, tend to not only the home team, the Grizzlies, but the away team if they ever have an injury. And then so you'd have to stay at the stadium for about an hour afterwards just to make sure if anybody needed anything. But,
very time consuming.
Yeah. So it was time consuming, but I really enjoyed it. It was great.
I'd have done it.
It was fun.
At least for a while, yeah. That's pretty cool. So are you still affiliated with any pro teams?
It's really funny because the NBA decided a few years ago that you didn't have to have a team ophthalmologist anymore. So that's not something that happens anymore. I disagree with that because there's always eye injuries.
Sure.
There's usually on average 1,400 eye injuries the course of a season.
Wow, I would not have realized that.
Yeah, that's been studied and that's been kind of looked at. But they made a decision that you don't necessarily need a team ophthalmologist anymore, so you don't have that. But I did that for several years. I still consult for some teams. There's still some agents that they know me, so it's once you do a player and the agent feels comfortable with you, they'll start sending you more players. So I still do a lot of baseball players, some soccer players, and some other professional athletes. So, and every once in a while I'll get a call, not as often as before, but anytime there's like some eye injury, ESPN will call me for a comment, and
nice.
They'll ask me, hey, what do you think of this, and what do you think of that?
So here we are. We're close to the finish line, and you so craftedly and articulately avoided the one question I was going to lead into all the other stuff. So I'm going to make you come back to this. Give me a couple of the award sections, because I think my viewers would be interested in this. I think they would like to know some of the things that you've been, knighted with. I know personally, so self-promotion is difficult for me as well. Somebody's asking me about things, but at the same time, I think it should be celebrated because it's aspirational and it gives other people motivation to, dream as big as they can dream and go after it, especially if it's their passion. So give me just a couple of the highlight moments for you.
Well, I mean, I'm excited about how my research has led to stuff. So UNESCO gave me an award for the innovation of light to treat dry eye. Some residency awards. The things I'm always happy about is awards that are helping people. So when I was in medical school and class president, I started a program for the inner city youth of Chicago, where if they were interested in science, we would have pre-meds and meds go over to the inner cities to work with these students and kind of show them the ropes and teach them, if they were interested in becoming a doctor, this is the steps to becoming a doctor, and then tutoring them, mentoring them. So it was a program that we had started in undergrad that I brought to medical school. And so I got an award for that. I got a teaching award, a national teaching award for science curriculum that I developed. And the whole thought there was, like you were saying, people learn in different ways. Mm-hmm. So if I tell you about something, maybe you learn that way. Mm-hmm. But there's some people that need to see it. So I started hands-on chemistry labs that a high school teacher could do to teach different scientific principles. So instead of just talking about a scientific principle, here's a lab that you can do with your students to bring it to life. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like taking the physics lab and bringing it into a chemistry lab, kind of those things, like seeing a ball drop and talking about gravity, that kind of stuff. Yeah. So I got a national teaching award for developing hands-on science curriculum. So I don't know, just things like that.
So here's the funny part. I know it made you uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. People that achieve a lot of things in life because it is pursuant of their passion, the passion actually brings about humility. Yeah. And it's tough to talk about. And what I found was, and this is as we get to the finish line, so I want you to think about what you would leave my listeners with as a final thought. So I'll give you a little minute to chew on that for a second. But where this came to light for me was I was gifted with an opportunity to present to the Memphis Fire Department. As you may know, I'm retired Memphis firefighter paramedic and love that profession. And I had the opportunity to present awards one evening to the firemen for that year for all the different awards, life-saving, et cetera. And the overwhelming, resounding sentiment from those guys as I came in, of course, they were happy to see me and stuff. And then we're talking, I'm about to go up and do the presentations. It's a church full of people. And was that they felt very uncomfortable. They didn't really want to walk up on the stage, getting these awards and medals and stuff, because that's their job. They love, this is their words to me. They're like, Camp, we're doing our job. You did your job. Yeah. In the end, recognition for it's not why we do it. Yeah. And this is what brought to me that moment, was because unless I stepped out of that role, if I would have still been a firefighter paramedic, I would have been in the same train of thought. But having gone through some things and now being on the other side of stuff, being able to look at it from a different lens, if you will. Mm-hmm. See what I did there. The other lens was this: how do you inspire the next generation if they don't see what you've done as being either recognized or significant? And those awards are stamps in time of significance. And it just shows that the hard work was worth it. Do people like yourself or even me do the things for the pats on the back? I would say no. Because we are doing what we love to do. We're doing what we feel is needed and we understand the impact that it's having. So having a medal or an award or something you could put on your shelf, that is not why we do it. But I have come to understand that it is important to embrace those moments. And when you do it with the right approach and you're humble about it, then other people really feed on that, and they need that. And that's the thing. And that's what I told them. I said, people need this. They need to know that what you've done was important. And sometimes just having a moment of recognition speaks volumes to the community, because it was televised.
Yeah. And then the other thing that I forgot is, I say this with every award, it's always a team award,
It's true.
So it's, whatever award somebody gets, there's a team behind them that helped them and did it. So, if it's an innovation award, it's all the patients that signed up for these research studies and all the staff that helped me get this research study, or all the people that put their hours in to produce a paper and produce an FDA study and get a paper published. So, there's a lot, all these things are team awards. So I hate being the person that gets the recognition, but I'll take it, but I want to give the recognition to everybody else. And you were saying it before, the mentors that helped you get to that position. They, I wish that any award that you got, you could just down the line, just give 20 or 30 awards down the line with everybody else. But, recognition comes, you don't have to pursue it. Recognition will come. I mean, there's some people that pursue. I think the dean of students, where, I never saw in the years that I was there him getting any recognition, but when he passed away, you could see the love that the whole room, was just there for him. And, that's it. You may not get recognition, but
absolutely. That, my friend, says everything that you need to say. People do the things for the right reason, and you're going to have the impact that you're supposed to have. Dr. Toyos, as we wrap, what would you leave my listeners with going into the future as innovation, as inspiration, as the person that you are?
I would just say one of the things that we touched on is that you have to be hard-headed and to succeed, because nobody is going to, if you are an innovator, nobody's going to come and go, oh yeah, that's great, and show you a lot of love and put in all the work that needs to happen. So if you have a great idea, that's step one, and it's probably the easiest step, is the great idea. The harder stuff is pursuing that idea when you have detractors, going forward with that idea and taking the time to develop it, bring it to light, and put all the work in that it takes for it to be adopted. So there's a lot of stuff there. Just having the great idea is not enough.
It's not enough. You got to put the work in. Folks, this is the American dream, if you don't mind me saying.
Yeah, I agree.
A person from, your parents immigrated to here from obviously an oppressed area, and then they gave you the opportunities to take flight, and you took those opportunities. So if you are sitting out there and you're thinking to yourself, hey, look, man, I'm coming from a tough spot. I'm not going to have a chance at life. Look, anything can be possible if you're willing to put the work in. Have the dream, have the vision, put the work in, continue to pursue your passion. And I got news for you. You will achieve things that you never even thought possible. And then along the way, that's going to inspire other people to do the exact same thing. I want to thank you guys, my listeners, tuning in every single week, man, sending me the comments, sending me the fine love that I need your encouragement. Believe me, I'm in here, but I need you out there. You've got to encourage me to keep going, because, man, it's tough. It's tough sometimes. But when I have great guests like you, Dr. Toyos, thank you so much for coming down. Thank you guys for tuning in. Go to my website, motivatewithcoachcamp.com. And until next time, Coach Camp out.
I love the chase and the hunt, and I set the pace when I'm running. I always take what I want and I always give it 100. Don't need a bank, no, I'm funded. Play the game like it's nothing. I'm always thankful for something. Don't take for granted, stay humble. Now wake up, it's time to look at the enemy. Look in the mirror if he is no friend to me. It's not working out, maybe it's the chemistry. It's time to break up so I can make a better me. Better believe in your mind, cause it's everything. You can mold, shape, find almost anything. All it takes is some time and some clarity. it's mine.